The true story of CH. Termite for XW ROM. The first time I saw CH. Termite was on Melvin G's yard. He was showing me his dogs, like his 6x Winner Junior Yellow's littermate Burrow and many other fine red boy Jocko dogs. After looking at about 50 dogs, I asked which one is Termite. As Perry had brought me there to show me his stifle-eating machine, Melvin G told me you walked right by him on the way in. He was that first dog behind the house. I thought to myself, the first dog I remember seeing was an impressive-looking big black dog, looked like an Eli dog to me. Sure enough, we walked back up to the house and Perry says that's Termite. That's Termite. Wow, what an impressive-looking dog, if looks could kill. He had the look of a lifer in his eyes, a being that had killed before and would kill again if given the opportunity. Perry told me don't get too close to him. If he grabs you, will have to use a breaking stick to get him off you. Why would I want to get close to him? The hairs on the back of my neck were standing just looking at him. The reason Termite was on Melvin's yard was that he was getting ready to be worked for his 4th show. Perry let Melvin and his sons condition Termite because they were covering most of the huge pot that was involved in this show. This show was much talked about back in those days. It was kind of a grudge match between Perry and Fletcher Chavis. Mr. Chavis called Termite out because he said Termite was not from his family of dogs. Now why would Mr. Chavis disown a monster like Termite and claim he wasn't of his bloodline? Mr. Chavis was not a man of means, but what he lacked in wealth he more than made up in great dogs. That is how Boone got involved in this great show. He told Mr. Chavis that he would back his Lil Joe dog all the way against Termite. Well, the day of this great show arrived and there was a bevy of dogmen at Perry's place. A veritable who's who in the game back then. There were cars with plates from 26 states there, not that I took the time to count them. That's what the newspaper said. Come nightfall and the dogs are washed and released. This was a classic show, a contrast in fighting styles. Lil Joe a head dog that would only bite the head and Termite a stifle dog that would only bite the stifle. Lil Joe did an amazing job of keeping Termite from reaching his stifles for about 20 minutes, but when Termite finally hit him high in the stifle, that was all she wrote. It was downhill from there for Lil Joe. Termite proceeded to put on a display of hard biting that was witnessed by few before then. Lil Joe made a couple of game scratches, dragging his back legs, the way strays do after being struck by a pickup truck on a country road. Termite made a few scratches too, kinda funny though. He avoided the head like the plague, ran to the side of Lil Joe and hit his stifle from the side, never missed a step though. Well, around 45 minutes, Lil Joe showed he was deep game, took more than most but not dead game and got counted out. Then about this time when everyone was settling their baits and not believing what they had just witnessed, here comes this young lady screaming that the LAW was up at the house. Well, if you haven't seen 200 people scatter in 200 different directions, then you haven't lived. The first thing I hit was the brand new barbed wire fence Perry had just put up around his place. After leaving most of my clothing hung up on the fence, the next thing I ran into was a 10-foot drop into an icy cold creek. I didn't feel a thing, just kept moving. The next morning I woke up at the motel. Was it all a bad dream? Nope, those scratches all over my body weren't from a night of wild sex. I want to thank the late Glenn Cottingham for picking us up along that dark country road, a harrowing experience for a city boy like myself. The next few days there were all kinds of stories in the local papers. The one I remember the most was where they said the state vet was trying to keep Lil Joe alive for evidence, and how he had to amputate one of his rear legs and he found a canine embedded in the femur. Made for some grisly reading. Perry was the only one that was charged in that case, as it was on his property and a local breeder made incriminating statements against him. His penalty was he couldn't keep dogs for 3 years and a small fine. The good old days. They even let him get most of his dogs back. In the late 70s, early 80s, Mr. Fletcher Chavis bred some dogs that any fancier would be proud to own. Much of his original stock came from that old dog CH Yellow John ROM, and for years Mr. Chavis campaigned with those inbred red boy dogs that he got from RT-Base. He was considered one of the best. In the mid-70s an outstanding discovery was made. Vernon Jackson had a dog that he purchased from Don Mayfield that he called Hank. He was inbred Mayfield Lightning to blood. Hank didn't start till he was 3 years old, but when he did, he not only turned out to be a phenomenal performer, but an exceptional producer as well. He was bred to a bitch of B Ras called Queenie, and from that litter came Jocko, Argo, Pearl, Apple and a few other good ones. Mr. Chavis ended up with Jocko, and that was the beginning of the famous Red Boy, Jocko line. Mr. Chavez campaigned with Jocko and he looked to be unbeatable due to the inherited trait of Hank's back-end style. Jocko became a CH and was retired for stud. He was bred to his sister Apple and several other bitches that he sired. These bitches were bred into Yellow John, who was a triple cross off Red Boy, and that was the beginning of Jocko's fame as a producer. Out of these breedings came Tance GRCH Yellow ROM, Gaines Jr. A5XW, others were Chavis Rojo, STP's GRCH John Boy and his littermate brother CH Torah, Super Nats Boots, and a host of others. However, there is another side of the story that only few people know about. Mr. Chavez had a bitch by the name of Sassy Mead. She was half Red Boy and half Lonzo's breeding. He bred Lady to Jocko and created a whole different strain of dogs. In that litter came Chavez, Dangerous Dan, Thor, Margaret and Rose. Rose was the GR dam of T5XW. Yellow and Junior. However, these dogs were black in color and thought not to be up to the standards of the original stock and ended up as pets. During my travels through the South, I purchased a son of Dangerous Dan and a friend of mine purchased both a female and a male. The male I got was named Termite. My first show with Termite was in 1983 with H. Groves. I came in overweight and had to pay the forfeit. Later on that year, one contracted into D. Tant, who had a reputation of being one of the best doggers of the South. Many of my friends thought I was a little cocky going into him. I was declared the winner in .38, next Termite won going into Jackie. As in 20 and I was getting ready for his CH match. JC Shia and Tugboat had won several matches and both had outstanding reputations. I couldn't resist the opportunity of going into the best. Tugboat lived up to his reputation, but by 30 Termite was in the winner's circle at 58. Well, by this time I was satisfied with his performance and was considering his retirement. Unfortunately, I could resist another challenge. This time it was the grand old man himself, Fletcher Chavez. We couldn't agree on the terms of a contract and Chavez sold his dog to Rocking Roots Kennel and he said he had the perfect style to win over Termite. Big Joe put in a great show, but by 117 Termite had won his fourth. Termite is retired now, but you may be hearing about his offspring someday in the future. Well, there you have it, the story of Carolina Kennel champion Termite.